Shropshire, England, a quiet land of rolling fields and soft amber light, where the evenings seemed to last forever. There lived a 17-year-old girl named Georgia Williams, bright, kind, and full of promise. On the night of May 26, 2013, Georgia left her family's home in Telford. She was only going to a friend's house, Jamie Reynolds, for a quick photo session. She told her parents she'd be back in half an hour. 3 hours later, her mother received a message. "I'm hanging out with friends. Don't worry." A simple text, familiar emojis. But Georgia never came back. 2 days later, detectives unlocked a camera Reynolds had tried to wipe clean. What they found were photos that told the story no one should ever see, each image capturing the final moments of a young life, one breath at a time, in absolute silence. It became the case that shook the entire nation, the kind of brutality seasoned detectives had never witnessed before. From an innocent photo shoot, the small, peaceful town of Telford descended into a nightmare without a dawn. Georgia Williams was born on September 17, 1995, in Telford, a quiet town in Shropshire, England, a place of red brick houses and narrow streets lined with maple trees. She was the youngest daughter of Steve and Lynette Williams, and the little sister of Scarlett. Her family was close, filled with warmth and quiet pride. Georgia grew up as a symbol of hope, smart, responsible, compassionate. She had been bullied in middle school, but rather than grow bitter, she learned to protect others who couldn't protect themselves. At high school, she became the head girl, a respected leader and role model. She joined the Air Cadets, dreaming of one day serving as a paramedic in the Royal Air Force. She had that kind of smile that made people believe the world could still be kind. At 17, Georgia worked part-time at a local petrol station. That's where she met Jamie Reynolds, a 22-year-old man who kept mostly to himself, quiet, awkward, a little out of place. Most people ignored him, but not Georgia. She reached out, talked to him, invited him into conversations, made him feel seen. It was the kind of kindness that came naturally to her. But to Jamie Reynolds, that kindness was not light. It was fuel. To him, Georgia wasn't just a friend. She was proof that he mattered. What began as gratitude slowly turned into obsession, and obsession soon became fantasy. When he confessed his feelings, Georgia gently turned him down. She said she valued him as a friend, nothing more. He smiled and said, "That's okay." But inside, something in him broke. That's the moment when men like him cross an invisible line from wanting to be loved to needing control. Jamie Reynolds had been isolated for most of his life, disconnected, starved of validation. At 14, he had been caught watching extreme violent pornography, the kind most adults can't stomach. His parents tried to block the sites, but he found a way, registering his own private Wi-Fi account and continuing in secret. When they contacted child services, they were told it wasn't illegal. That silence, that single bureaucratic shrug, planted the seed. As the years passed, Reynolds stopped distinguishing between fantasy and reality. He started writing stories about torture and murder, printing photos of girls and sketching nooses around their necks. He wrote 40 such stories, each more twisted than the last. One of them, finished in May 2013, was titled Georgia Williams in Surprise. 3 weeks later, he made it real. Not every monster is born in the dark. Some are raised in plain sight, nurtured by neglect, and guided by the kindness of those who believed they could be saved. May 26, 2013. A quiet Sunday evening in Telford. The Williams family was hosting a small barbecue in their garden. Laughter, the smell of grilled food, the kind of night that feels safe. Among them, 17-year-old Georgia Williams was getting ready in her room jeans, a leather jacket, a soft touch of makeup. She told her parents she'd be gone for just half an hour. Her friend, Jamie Reynolds, I wanted to practice photography. He'd asked her to be his model, just a few portraits. Georgia hesitated. Her grandparents were visiting, but she didn't want to disappoint anyone. That was who she was, a promise kept, no matter how small. Her father, Steve Williams leaned on the doorway, smiling. "You look like Sandy from Grease." She laughed, kissed his cheek, and walked out the door. 7:30 p.m. The moment time stopped moving forward, the distance between their homes was less than 5 minutes. A short drive for a one-way journey. Inside the Reynolds house, where his parents were away on vacation, Jamie had prepared everything: a camera, a rope, and a red recycling bin placed at the center of the room. He called it a setup. Georgia thought it was art. She had no idea she was stepping into a scene written weeks earlier in one of his stories. The first few recovered photos showed her smiling, slightly nervous, unaware. Her trust, her kindness, the two things that defined her, became the very tools he used to destroy her. Some people don't want your love. They want your surrender the moment they see fear in your eyes, because that's the only way they feel alive. When Georgia sensed something was wrong, it was already too late. Reynolds began giving strange directions, changing his tone. The rope hung above her head, the light dimmed, and then silence. What followed is known only through the evidence he left behind. He strangled Georgia to death, photographed and filmed the act, then violated her body over and over again. In different rooms of his parents' home, he removed her jewelry, keeping them as trophies, tokens of ownership. Then, as if nothing had happened, he sat down, ate, and looked through the photos. The next morning, he loaded Georgia's body into his silver van. He drove away, stopped at a movie theater, and went inside to watch a film. Investigators later said it was his twisted version of a date. That night, Georgia's mother sent her a message. "When are you coming home?" A few minutes later came the reply. "I'm with friends. Don't worry." It looked like Georgia's voice, but it wasn't. By then, Georgia had been dead for almost 12 hours, and the person texting her mother was the man who killed her. The morning of May 27th, 2013 began with a strange stillness over Shropshire. Inside the Williams home, unease hung in the air. Georgia's bed was untouched. Her phone was silent. Her favorite jacket still draped over the chair. Her mother, Lunette, sent a message at 6:30 a.m. "Are you okay, sweetheart? When are you coming home?" An hour later came a reply. "I stayed at a friend's house. My battery's about to die." It was the last message ever sent from Georgia's phone. Her mother read it and felt something she couldn't explain. The words were right, but the rhythm wasn't hers. That afternoon, when Georgia didn't return, the family contacted police. The investigation began immediately. Every clue pointed to one person: Jamie Reynolds, the man she had gone to see for a photo shoot. Officers went to Reynolds' house. They knocked. No answer. They called out. Silence. Finally, they broke the door open. The house was spotless, unnaturally so. No sign of Georgia. No sign of Jamie. Only a faint smell of bleach, and a camera with its memory wiped clean. A clean house can be a confession. It's what remains when someone tries to erase the truth. Reynolds' parents were contacted. They were away on holiday, but they gave police one critical lead: their son's van, a silver Ford Transit. With that, police issued an alert across the country. Cameras on motorways, petrol stations, and borders were all watching for one vehicle. 3 days later, on May 30th, officers found Reynolds at a small hotel in Glasgow, nearly 280 miles from home. He was alone, calm, and cooperative, too calm. When asked about Georgia, he said, "I don't know where she is." No emotion, no fear. He was taken into custody and brought back to Shropshire. Meanwhile, forensic teams re-examined his home. That same camera, the one thought to be empty, was handed to digital forensics. Technicians began the slow, meticulous process of data recovery. When the first images appeared on screen, silence filled the room. They showed Georgia alive, nervous, unaware, posing at the start of the shoot. Then came the sequence that no one in that lab will ever forget. Her final moments, the rope, the red bin, the end. Those photographs confirmed what everyone feared: Georgia was dead. But what they found next was worse than anyone imagined. Hidden on his hard drives were 16,800 images and 72 videos, many depicting violence, torture, and real acts of death. He hadn't just consumed that darkness. He had created it. In a notebook, they found 40 stories he had written, fantasies of killing and assaulting women. One of them bore the title Georgia Williams in surprise. It wasn't fiction. It was his blueprint, tracking the van's GPS. Police retraced his path, from his house to a movie theater 60 miles away, where he watched a film while Georgia's body lay in the back of the van. Then onward, to Nant-y-Garth Pass, near Wrexham, a desolate stretch of woodland. That's where they found her, naked, strangled, alone among the trees. Even the most seasoned officers turned away. One detective later said quietly, "It wasn't just death we found there. It was the echo of everyone who failed to stop him." For the first time, the police weren't hunting a man. They were staring at a reflection of a system that had seen the warning signs and looked away. December 2013. The courtroom in Shrewsbury was heavy with silence. Sitting in the dock was a thin, pale young man, Jamie Reynolds. 23 years old, his face expressionless, his eyes cold and distant. He had spoken very little during the investigation. But on the first day of trial, without warning, he stood up, faced the judge, and said quietly, "I plead guilty." No explanations. No emotion, just those words. His defense attorney, visibly shaken, told the court, "Your Honor, my client suffers from severe personality disorders and has lost all capacity for control." But Justice Wilkie, the presiding judge, refused to let that be an excuse. His voice was sharp, deliberate, and cutting. Jamie Reynolds is a sexually deviant individual with a clear intention to kill. Georgia Williams died in unimaginable fear, the result of a murder meticulously planned and executed. This man poses a permanent threat to the public. Then came the sentence, the highest under British law, a whole life term. Life imprisonment with no possibility of parole. Jamie Reynolds became the youngest person in British history ever to receive such a sentence. In the gallery, Steve and Lynette Williams, Georgia's parents, sat hand in hand. As the prosecution presented the final photographs of their daughter, both broke down. They left the courtroom, unable to breathe in a space that had just replayed her final moments. Outside, Steve told reporters, "No sentence will ever be enough, because he still has life, something he stole from our daughter. A full life sentence may lock away the body, but it never touches the hole left behind." Justice, in this case, came too late and not deep enough. 2 years later, in 2015, a serious case review was published. It exposed devastating failures by police, social services, and mental health authorities. In 2008, Reynolds had tried to strangle another 17-year-old girl in his own home. He was questioned and merely given a final warning. No charges, no supervision, no psychological evaluation. In 2011, he deliberately reversed his car into a girl who had rejected him. Once again, the case was quietly closed. Georgia's death was not born of impulse. It was written, permitted, and signed by every person who saw the danger and looked the other way. The official report called him a murderer in the making, a label that came too late to save the girl who had once believed in him. When asked if justice had been served, Georgia's mother whispered, "Justice did its job, but our hearts will never rest." The law punished a man, but what it could not punish was the silence that created him. When the courtroom doors finally closed, justice, at least on paper, had been done. But for the Williams family, the real sentence had only just begun. Back in their small home in Telford, time seemed to stand still. Georgia's room remained exactly as she had left it. Her perfume still lingered in the air. Her jacket hung neatly over the chair. Every morning, her mother, Lunette, made an extra cup of tea and watched it go cold. A year later, she wrote a book titled Our Georgia. It was not just a memoir. It was a confession, a warning, and a mother's unanswered cry for accountability. In it, she wrote, "He's serving a life sentence, but I still lie awake every night because I know he still gets to breathe." In most cases, evil hides behind rage or jealousy. But this time, it was born from emptiness, quiet, patient, and nurtured by indifference. Georgia did not die because she was weak. She died because she believed kindness could save someone. And sometimes, that belief becomes the blade turned inward. The screen fades to black. A single line appears. Georgia Williams, 1995 to 2013. An angel destroyed by the darkness of her own compassion. Justice can bind a killer's hands, but it can never bind memory. If you believe the truth must keep speaking so that darkness never grows in silence, subscribe. Stay with us, because some stories must be told, again and again.